Hillsboro, New Hampshire is located in the heart of what railroad enthusiasts dubbed Mogul Country. Portions of southwestern and western New Hampshire, where the Boston and Maine's 260 Mogul-type steam locomotives were prominently used on passenger and freight trains during the steam era. Typical characteristics of Mogul Country included bucolic scenery, light industry, picturesque stations and freight houses, and classic wooden trestles and covered bridges. Hillsboro had all of the above. Photographs abound of the Boston and Maine's famous 260s working freight and passenger trains up and down the Kentucky River Valley.
The rails to Hillsboro were constructed by the Peterborough and Hillsboro Railroad, opening in 1878 and extending a line that had already reached Peterborough from Worcester. The line became a branch of the Boston and Maine Railroad in 1889, combining with the Kentucky Valley Railroad from Hillsboro to Kentucky, essentially creating the Worcester and Kentucky branch of the Boston and Maine. The floods of 1936 wreaked havoc on the railroads in this part of the state, and sections of the line between Peterborough and Elmwood Junction, and then from Hillsboro to West Henniker, were taken out of service. Thereafter, Hillsboro was instead served directly from Nashua by trains using the Keene branch running west to Elmwood Junction and then north on the old Worcester and Kentucky remnant to Hillsboro. Following World War II, operations were simplified once again when a curve was installed at Elmwood Junction to bypass the redundant diamond and junction there. This curve, the brainchild of section foreman Eddie Magoon, was immortalized as Magoon's Curve. The entire branch from Nashua to Hillsboro, made up of remnants of the Keene branch and the Worcester and Kentucky branch, were renamed the Hillsboro branch.
One of the most fascinating and famous aspects of the railroad here in Hillsboro was the curved wooden trestle located on River Street. The trestle began up at the intersection of River and Bridge Streets, curving in tight proximity past the houses in the hosiery mill. Dick Kemp, a prominent resident of Hillsboro, was an ardent collector of Mack trucks, and for many years his collection sat under the trestle as a sort of impromptu museum. It just so happened that Dick was also a rail fan, snapping many pictures of the Boston and Maine's local freights as they passed right above his property.
Hillsboro was a holdout for rail service in this part of New Hampshire, a region that saw much of its railroad prominence and many of its lines disappear during the steam era. As hard as it can be for us to believe today, Hillsboro saw freight service well into the diesel era. Passenger service ended in 1936 and the station was demolished after World War II, yet passengers were permitted to ride the cabooses of freights for close to 2 decades afterwards. On June 6, 1954, a passenger excursion was operated into Hillsboro, utilizing Alco diesel switchers, which had replaced steam locomotives in Nashua due to steam facilities on the branch having been eliminated. Excursionists rode in several of the B&M's American Flyer coaches. Another fan trip was run on May 4, 1968, using Bud RDCs at a ticket price of $9. But these trips must have seemed out of place because, by and large, Hillsboro was the domain of short local freights operated out of Nashua. Many times these freights were nothing more than a handful of tanker cars for Valancourt Oil here in town. On occasion, a boxcar or two of public delivery accompanied the lonely locomotive and caboose. Locomotives used on the line were almost always smaller diesel switchers, either Alco S units or EMD SW1s. These lightweight engines were required due to an ancient riveted steel bridge that still existed at South Lineborough. A trademark of Mogul Country were ancient wooden covered bridges. They dotted this region on various branch lines in places like Goffstown, Kentucky, Bennington, and here in Hillsboro. An impressive covered bridge spanning the Kentucky River was located just off of Bridge Street. Unlike its counterparts, it featured a pedestrian walkway on the outside of the bridge. Many classic photographs show steam locomotives and later diesel locomotives entering and exiting the covered bridge here in Hillsboro.
Bruce Davison, who often visited Deering, New Hampshire during that time, recalls seeing a freight head up to Hillsboro with tanker cars for Valancourt oil around New Year's Eve 1972-1973. Bruce remembers that the tanker cars sat at Valancourt for much of the winter, later being retrieved by the Boston and Maine's local freight sometime in spring 1973. This was the very last train service to Hillsboro, and the tracks from Monadnock Paper and Bennington to Hillsboro sat dormant until 1979, when they were formally abandoned and removed soon thereafter. One of the last holdouts of Mogul Country, Hillsboro, deep in the rural heart of New England, finally lost its railroad presence. The covered bridge was burned in an arson fire in December 1985, and the wooden trestle dismantled about the same time. Today, those days of SW1s, blue cabooses, and short local freights seem almost alien, part of the distant past in a small community that hasn't heard the call of a train in half a century. The old Hillsboro Freight House, a holdout for many years, was finally demolished in May of 2022 after decades of disrepair. The old yard here at Hillsboro is still open like it used to be, but quiet and perhaps not safe from development for much longer. But those photographs, like those taken by Dick Kemp, immortalize the Boston and Maine's lasting presence in the smallest and unlikeliest of places.